Third phase of moon. Third phase.
Welcome back. Blake Cousins here, third phase of moon with a special report. We have astrophysicist Michio Kaku, and we're going to be going over his statements of the possible connection between the newly released info coming in from the Pentagon themselves. We have tonight a special guest panel with Paula Asteria, including Richard Giordano from Goof on Radio. We also have Doc Skinner from 1028 Productions. We're also going to get some insight from my brother, Brent Cousins. This exclusive interview is possible due to Dr. J Radio Live and is exclusive with Michio Kaku. Listen up, everybody. The one and only Dr. Michio Kaku. Dr. Kaku, welcome to the show.
Glad to be on.
Now, let's go back to even before 45 years, 50, maybe 60 years. At what point in your life did you realize that science, specifically physics, would guide your life?
Well, it all started when I was 8 years old. Something happened which changed my life forever. You see, it was announced on the news that a great scientist had just died, but that he could not finish his greatest unfinished work. And they published a picture of his desk showing this open book that could not be finished. And I said to myself, what's so hard? I mean, why couldn't the greatest scientist of our time finish this theory? So I went to the library, and over the years, I found out that this man was called Albert Einstein. And he was chasing after a theory that would allow him to, quote, read the mind of God. So I said to myself, wow, that's for me. That's what I want to work on. I want to work on this theory that would unify all the forces of the universe into a single equation. Just like E equals mc squared summarizes the nature of the stars, the galaxies, the energy source of the universe itself in an equation 1 inch long. And he thought there must be another equation 1 inch long that unifies gravity with the electromagnetic force, that is light, and the two nuclear forces into a single cosmic theory, allowing him to read God's thoughts. And, well, that's what I do for a living. I work on the unified field theory. And today, by the way, I think most scientists would believe that we have a candidate for the theory of everything.
You actually beat my next question already, which was going to ask you is how far along are you? Because I believe you are trying to complete this unified field theory. And if so, is it even possible to start to see progress in it?
Yes, well, this would be the culmination of 2,000 years of investigation into the nature of reality, ever since the Greeks asked themselves the question, what is the world made of? Now, Democritus, the Greek philosopher, thought that everything was made out of atoms, but he had a rival. Pythagoras studied music. He studied the vibrations of a lyre string, and he asked himself, why is it that a lyre string has notes in interval separations called resonances? And he thought that music was the paradigm to create an entire universe, not atoms. Well, of course, the atomic theory gave us many of the wonders of today, transistors, the internet, all that comes from the theory of atoms. But we now realize that maybe Pythagoras was right, that all the atoms we see are nothing but musical notes on a tiny vibrating string. And that's why we have so many subatomic particles, nothing but notes on a lyre string, very tiny lyre string. And that physics is nothing but the laws of harmony of all these vibrating strings. Chemistry is the melodies you can play on interacting strings. The universe is a symphony of strings. And then the mind of God that Einstein struggled with for 30 years of his life is cosmic music. Resonating, of course, is much more problematic. But yeah, we do have a candidate for the theory of everything, and it's called string theory.
Now, as you were a young man, or even earlier than that, as a child, as you looked out into the cosmos before we ever went in the Apollo missions to the moon,
Did you believe that we could be essentially neighbors to some other civilization?
Well, yeah, and believe it or not, we physicists try to rank civilizations on the basis of energy. A type 1 civilization in outer space would be one that has harnessed all planetary energy. They control the weather, they control the oceans, they control the earthquakes. A type 2 civilization exhausts the power of a planet, and they consume the energy of the mother sun. They basically use all the energy from the sun to energize their machines. That's called type 2, very similar to the Federation of Planets on Star Trek. Star Trek would be a type 2 civilization. Then there's type 3. A type 3 civilization is galactic. They roam the galactic space lanes, they play with black holes, like the Empire of The Empire Strikes Back. Now, on this cosmic scale, what are we? Are we type 1 that can play with the weather, type 2 that play with stars, type 3 that play with galaxies? No, we're type 0. We get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal, and we have a long ways to go before we become type 1, 2, or 3.
I'm glad you brought that up because I constantly argue that the internal combustion engine or the idea of burning chemicals doesn't go back to the car, the automobile. It really goes back to rockets fired in China, I believe in 800 AD. So we're essentially using a 1,000, 1,200-year-old technology right now. Now, as a physicist, I'm sure you're constantly exposed to new technologies and new science. What do you think is the way of the future as far as transportation? Is it going to be what people call green renewable energy, such as electric automobiles, or do you see something better? For instance, I'm sure you might have seen a few people who have figured out a way to power their car via water. Apparently, what happens is the water is separated from the hydrogen and oxygen are separated, and it essentially runs on hydrogen is how I understood from one person's. But I'm sure, as I mentioned before, you've seen many of these yourself. So what's your take on our future of travel?
Well, we've gone through 3 basic stages of scientific revolution and travel. We're entering the 4th wave now. The first wave was the Industrial Revolution, which gave us the locomotive and the automobile, so we didn't have to run and do our chores by foot anymore. That's the first revolution. The second revolution was the electric revolution, which gave us the light bulb, but also the electric engine and hydro dams and all the wonders of the electric revolution. The third revolution is the high-tech revolution, giving us telecommunication satellites, the internet, all the wonders of high technology. And we're now entering the 4th wave. The 4th wave is physics at the molecular level. That is, we're talking about artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and biotechnology. But in the next 20 years or so, we're going to enter the 5th wave of innovation, and that is quantum computers and BrainNet, the ability to communicate by telepathy, by simply pure thought, and also fusion power. So I think the ultimate source of transportation, energy for transportation, will come from fusion. Now, fusion is the power of the sun. That's why the sun shines. It's why the stars light up at night. It's a very powerful source of energy, the source of energy of the hydrogen bomb. But we think that in Cordache, France, we have the ITER fusion reactor, and hopefully in 10 years' time or so, who knows for sure, we'll turn it on and we'll get unlimited power from seawater. The hydrogen in seawater is the basic fuel for a fusion reactor, which has almost no nuclear waste other than helium gas, which is commercially valuable, and it does not have meltdowns, but we're not there yet. Give us a few more decades and we will have fusion power, the power of the stars on the Earth.
Now, you said a few things in there. I want to ask you about a couple of them. I've heard, as far as math goes, kind of like Moore's law predicting every 18 months that the amount of circuits we could put on a chip doubles, like our technology. For instance, an iPhone years ago had 2 gigabytes. I believe currently they're offering 512 for in such a such a small piece of a device. What's your take on the technological singularity? The point for those out there who are not familiar, when artificial intelligence will match ours and then surpass ours. Is this something to worry about? Is this a doomsday scenario like Terminator 2? Or is this just sci-fi woo-ha stuff, whatever you want to call it?
Well, the singularity is when the machines become so powerful that they put humans in cage, throw peanuts at us, and make us dance behind bars, just like we make monkeys dance behind bars for peanuts today. Well, there is a speed bump on the way to the singularity. You see, Moore's law is slowing down. Moore's law is going to collapse. Moore's law simply says you can double the power of computers and transistors on a chip every 18 months, but eventually you hit atoms. You hit transistors that are so small, they are the size of atoms. And at that point, you get leakage, you get heat generation, the transistors melt, and basically Moore's law collapses. Now, when you talk to an engineer, the engineer may say that if Moore's law continues to 245, the year 2045, then computing on atoms. We can't do that yet, but that's the dream of those people who think that one day the robots will throw peanuts at us as we dance behind bars.
I've read that Google not too long ago unveiled a quantum computer. I even saw a short video on it, and they said, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this quantum computer was able to solve a math problem that would have taken the world's fastest supercomputer approximately 10,000 years, and this quantum computer did it in about 200 seconds. Am I right so far in what I said?
Yeah, except there's one big caveat that they forgot to mention. The quantum computer that you're talking about is a one-trick pony. That's all it can do. You realize that we have chess-playing machines now that are smarter than any human on your cell phone. Your cell phone can play chess and beat the world's grandmaster in chess, but we don't have a heart attack around it because you can't congratulate your cell phone. You can't slap it on the back. It has no understanding of self-awareness. So basically it's useless competing against a human being.
Now, if quantum capabilities and quantum technology is the fifth wave, going back to the electrical wave, let's say, for instance, that Einstein wasn't the one that was, not Einstein, sorry, I'm blanking out on the person who had the Edison. If he didn't prevail, but let's just say hypothetically Nikola Tesla did, how, in your view, would the world look differently today using the technology of the so-called free energy that goes through the air that he was talking about and trying to implement before he passed away?
Well, Tesla, as you know, was the great genius who was a rival of Thomas Edison. That's why we have AC currents in our house and not DC currents in our house, compliments of Tesla. Tesla believed in something called free energy, that you could somehow extract energy from the air. However, I have the complete works of Tesla. I've gone through hundreds of pages of his inventions, and he basically never fleshes it out. So we don't know what kind of theory that he had about free energy. Now, we know there's something called quantum free energy, that you can extract energy from the vacuum. We use quantum free energy to, for example, understand black holes, but it's very tiny. You need a black hole to create appreciable amounts of quantum free energy. So at the present time, the dream of energy from the air is still a dream. Sorry about that. The quantum theory does make possible free energy, but it's called the Casimir effect, and it's very small, very tiny, not of any practical use. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I'd rather have a real answer than cling on a dream that was with false hopes. Now, a lot of people talk that a black hole can sometimes, if not more often than not, be an Einstein-Rosen bridge, also known as, a wormhole. I just said it for layman's terms for those who don't. Is that what you think? Do you think that if we had a chance to venture in multiple black holes and know we were going to come out the other side somewhere, that they would in fact lead us somewhere else? Or are they just going to suck us in like they suck in light and everything else and would be stuck wherever?
Well, wormholes were first introduced by Einstein himself and his student Nathan Rosen in the year 1935. He took a black hole, which is shaped like a funnel, stuck two of them together back to back, so that if you fell into one funnel, you would get blasted out the other end. So connecting a black hole, therefore, to a white hole at the other end of a black hole. And then in 1963, mathematician Roy Kerr from New Zealand found the first exact solution of Einstein's equation, which realized the Einstein-Rosen bridge. Think of Alice in Wonderland. The looking glass is the wormhole. The looking glass is basically a circle that spins very, very rapidly, a circle made out of neutrons. If you stick your hand through the circle, your hand winds up on the other side of forever in Wonderland. So if you could go through the spinning ring, you would wind up on a parallel universe. And if you go backwards and fall through it a second time, you wind up in a second parallel universe. In fact, it's like hitting the up button of an elevator. In an elevator, you have many stories stacked on top of each other, except here we have solutions of Einstein's equation for a spinning black hole, where you have universes stacked upon other universes. Now, most black holes we see in outer space are rotating. One was clocked at about 1 million miles an hour. So we know that spinning black holes collapse to a ring of some sort, and that could be a gateway similar to the looking glass in Alice in Wonderland. However, no one's ever been there, so we don't know whether the mathematics corresponds to reality. Sorry about that one too.
Again, I'd rather have the truth than cling on false hopes. Now, there is a question in the chat, and I'm going to read that to you at the same time asking you the next question. Do you think it's possible for some time in, I guess almost everything is possible, but for us to travel using artificial gravity? And does gravity affect the space-time continuum, essentially causing wormholes and possibly time travel, if that's even feasible? And without tacking on too much, the question that is from Ronan Soul 9, which ties into this, reads, what stage will it be when we will have anti-gravity?
Well, first of all, anti-gravity is gravity itself. If I have an anti-electron, you reverse the charge of the electron and it has positive charge. But if I take anti-light, it turns out that anti-light is light itself. Light is its own antiparticle, and the graviton, a particle of gravity, is its own antiparticle. And so anti-gravity is gravity. The only way to create anti-gravity in outer space for our astronauts is to spin the spacecraft. If you spin the spacecraft, then you have centrifugal force, and centrifugal force would then keep our astronauts on the floor. Now, when you talk about wormholes, however, all bets are off. Because if you look at the solution for a wormhole very carefully, you find that they are also gateways to the past. So Newton, of course, thought that time was like an arrow. You fired it, it went uniformly forever. Einstein comes along and says, not so fast, not so many people. So the nomenclature is CTC, closed time-like curves. And then, of course, you have the problem of if you go backwards in time and kill your grandfather before you're born, then how can you be born to kill your grandfather before you're born?
The grandfather paradox you're talking about, right?
That's right. You can also be your own mother. If I have a young girl who is at an orphanage and she gets pregnant and someone kidnaps the baby girl and takes her back to the orphanage where she's dropped off again, she basically becomes her own mother. So if time travel is possible, you can be your own mother, your own father, your own granddaughter, your own grandson. A family tree unto yourself. Now, This, of course, defies logic. But if you add the quantum theory to all of this, then of course there's no problem. If the river of time forks into a quantum reality, a parallel reality, and you go backwards in time and you meet Abraham Lincoln at the Ford Theater before he's assassinated, you basically have saved a copy of Abraham Lincoln in a parallel universe. Your Abraham Lincoln did die at the Ford Theater, but you've saved someone else's Abraham Lincoln from being assassinated at the Ford Theater. That's how we can resolve every time travel paradox. In fact, the latest movie with the Avengers puts this into their plot line. If you watch the movie very carefully, they have more than one timeline. The timeline splits at several occasions, and that's how they incorporate the quantum theory into Hollywood.
Now, because we're talking about time and time travel, maybe you could shed some light, which you already, I believe you said you did on Fox, right? That's where you spoke about the alternate universe?
Yes.
Now, for those out there, I'm sure they all know about it, unless you've been not paying attention to news lately, is that we allegedly found a alternate universe where time goes backwards. How can we even fathom that?
Well, I think the newspapers had a field day, but let me explain. Our bodies are hit by ghost particles called neutrinos. Trillions of them every second goes through our bodies. However, certain neutrinos, when they go through the Earth, are absorbed. Therefore, these neutrinos hit us from space, but they don't hit us from the floor. They don't go through the Earth and then hit us from the ground up. They go up, down. They don't go down, up. However, in Antarctica, they found several tracks of neutrinos went from down up. That is, from the center of the Earth to the surface of the Earth. So how do you interpret that? Either they were anomalous particles, which is what I believe, or they were traveling backwards in time. And that's why instead of going from down up, from up down, they went down up. I personally believe that these are nothing but exotic particles that are beyond the standard model. That is, string theory predicts higher resonances. There should be higher resonances even beyond the neutron, the proton, the quark, and the neutrino. That's probably what they found in Antarctica. They probably found a higher octave of the string rather than a particle which was going backwards in time.
Now, not too long ago, again, recently in news, they talked about revising the Drake equation. I don't know who the scientist was that revised it, or maybe it was a team of people. Again, I'll defer to you on that. That a conservative number, estimate, of course it's an estimate only, of civilizations, maybe I think it was intelligent civilizations in our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, would be 36. What's your take on that?
Yes, I was also on Fox talking about that as well. Let's do a science experiment tonight. Go outside. Go outside at night, look up, and you'll see the Milky Way galaxy. And you wonder, how many stars are there? Well, we know the answer. The Milky Way galaxy in our own backyard has 100 billion stars. And then multiply that, reduce that number by the number of stars that have solar systems. Reduce that by the number of solar systems that have planets. Reduce that by the number of planets that have oceans. Reduce that by the number of oceans that have microbial life. You get the point. And that is, with a series of assumptions, you can calculate how many civilizations there are in the Milky Way galaxy. But in science we have the expression, garbage in, garbage out. Your assumptions could be faulty, and your results could also be faulty. So what they did in the United Kingdom was they took a stripped down Drake equation. They took the minimum assumptions of the Drake equation, and that's where that number 36 comes from. They assumed that a star has to live for at least 500 million years, because our Earth, of course, is about that old. And then they had to make assumptions that the star had planets, had enough material to create planets, and enough material to create a civilization that would last 100 years, so they would discover radio telescopes. And that's where the number 36 comes from. However, if you juggle Drake's equation even slightly, you can get all sorts of numbers from it. Carl Sagan thought that you get maybe 1,000,000 intelligent civilizations in the Milky Way galaxy from Drake's equation. So, like I said, garbage in, garbage out.
Well, and as it said, just by changing a number here or there can alter the equation drastically. Again, for everybody out there, it is an estimate. It's the best estimate that Frank Drake made at the time, but until we have answers, real answers, as opposed to hypotheticals, then it'll change. Last question as far as the topic of UFOs and things like that. I'm sure you've seen the DoD footage of the three craft. One was called the Tic Tac, one was called the Go Fast, and the Gimbal. Particularly the Tic Tac UFO was chased by Commander Fravor off the USS Princeton, and I don't want to say Eldridge, but another one right here off the coast of California. In that video, the craft seemed to be, first of all, it didn't have a heat signature. It seemed to be solid the whole way. And also, there was no traditional technology to, for instance, like rotors or wings or anything that we know to cause lift. And also, it was going so fast that the radar lock kept breaking from it. There were even reports that some of these were tracked as going as fast as 26 or 27,000 miles per hour. Now, how could that be without having a single sonic boom?
Okay, well, let's go back a bit. First of all, I get a lot of these sightings in the email, and about 95% of them can be dismissed as radar echoes, weather anomalies, weather balloons, meteorites, and natural phenomena. The last 5%, however, will make the hairs on the back of your head stand up because they are multiple sightings by multiple modes from credible witnesses. Not just one person saying, look, Martha, I see something up there. Nope. We're talking about Air Force pilots, not one, but many of them, simultaneously using sight and radar to lock onto these objects. So what can they be? Well, after crossing off all the list of possible candidates, I think there are only two that are credible. One, of course, is that maybe they are extraterrestrial, maybe from a Type 3 civilization that can easily cross over thousands of light years across the galaxy. But there is a second possibility, and that is these are hypersonic drones. You realize now that the Chinese, the Russians, and the Americans have now admitted publicly that they've been working on a secret form of weapon for the past 10, 15 years without telling anyone. These are hypersonic drones which can maneuver in the atmosphere. Now, our missiles are ballistic missiles. Once you fire them, you simply cross your fingers and they land where they land. They're ballistic. But these drones are maneuverable. They have special rockets that allow them to evade a Star Wars defensive shield. And that's why they were invented. Some people think that, yes, they travel between Mach 5 and Mach 20. And maybe, just maybe, they could be secret weapons devised by the Russians, the Chinese, and the Americans.
I'm really glad you brought up the hypersonic missiles. I remember after when it went online in Russia, and there was, I don't want to say a spectacle, but there was a press release, and our president asked our Joint Chiefs of Staff, when are we going to get a hypersonic missile? And if I recall correctly, the technology is based on what puts Sputnik up into as an artificial satellite over Earth. Can you tell everyone out there what a hypersonic missile does as far as technology to travel as fast as it does?
Well, most of the hypersonic missiles are simply ordinary ICBM ballistic missiles. You fire them, they attain around 18,000 miles per hour, and then they land on the Earth. The difference here is in the final few minutes before impact. At that point, they begin to fire a new set of rockets, which allow them to maneuver and evade any incoming Star Wars shield. That's the advance. Before then, rockets that were sent this way would misfire. They would spiral out of control because maneuvering at Mach 20 is not an easy feat. Very easy to spin out of control when you travel 20 times the speed of sound. But the Russians have claimed now that they have an operational system which does exactly that. Zigzag as it goes back and forth. Now, it turns out that these UFO sightings also zigzag, and you can calculate the centrifugal force inside that capsule. We've done that. It would be enough to crush any organic matter inside that rocket ship. So if the UFO is really extraterrestrial, it means they're probably drones, because no organic material can withstand the enormous centrifugal forces of a zigzagging missile coming in at Mach 20. And so they're probably drones. Whether they're extraterrestrial or military, we can debate, but they're probably drones.
So I have some insight on this topic, and I just want to say this topic is very exciting to me, the idea of terraforming Mars. It's also exciting to me because we haven't even thought about re-terraforming our own planet in places such as the desert, like the Saharan Desert. There's miles and miles of land that is just sand that can be terraformed and turned into a whole lush landscape with technology that we have. But right here he talks about terraforming Mars. And I think it's very interesting they discuss using detonating weapons to actually warm up the planet, which in my opinion might have caused the planet Mars to originally become inhabitable in the first place. I talked a little bit about that yesterday. But instead he thinks the idea of solar satellites, using solar satellites to melt the ice caps, is a better idea. And I find this very interesting because a physicist saying this, that's a little interesting because there has been a lot of talk about weather modification on our planet and instances where this might have occurred already and where our government might have been using it already. So I find that very interesting. And also I want to say, why stop at Mars? Why don't we focus on our own planet first? Like I said, so much land that we could terraform and turn into a lush, beautiful environment. So I normally go around giving a presentation at conferences on solutions for humanity, and I talk about everything from topics of full disclosure to circular communities, vertical gardens, etc. And one idea of the community I talk about is the Venus Project by Jean-Jacques Fresco. And he has these different blueprints for designs of ways you can laser excavate. There are these laser excavating machines that could literally instantly laser excavate a canal from the ocean to the middle of the desert. It's like a atomic laser sort of robotic device that would just move from the ocean to the desert, for an example, and just could cut a waterway straight into the middle of the desert. And I think that's really exciting and fascinating idea. And I actually read the series Dune earlier this year. I'm sure a lot of you out there have probably seen the movie. It's actually about to be remade soon, which I find very exciting. They don't talk about this concept as much, or it's not shown as much in the movie. It's more in the book if you read the book, but they actually talk a lot on the idea of terraforming the planet Dune. And that was actually the main inspiration for the whole series. Frank Herbert got the idea for Dune because at the time he was a journalist studying the sand dunes up in Northern California. And at the time, I believe it was back in the 60s, the wind coming up over the ocean was causing the sand to cover the roadways, and they had to keep uncovering the roadways. So he was investigating this as a journalist, and a team of scientists decided to start planting this sort of shrubbery over the dunes to keep them the sand from going over the roadways and to kind of basically terraform them. So that was his main inspiration for the entire Dune series, which I think is incredible. And in the first book, the first book especially, he talks a lot about how they could re-terraform the planet that was so dry that they had to actually use still suits to be able to get water from their own sweat to even survive, and turn it into a planet that had water and could grow plant life and not just be a large barren desert that these humans could barely survive on. And I just think that's such a fascinating idea. We have this technology. Now, it might be a bad thing, because if we use this technology, could it throw everything out of balance? Like, say, maybe our scientists possibly could have already been experimenting with this on our planet and could possibly be the cause for some crazy weather that has happened in recent years. Who knows? Just saying. But it's interesting to think about. And I think the idea of terraforming planets is incredible. And if you haven't read Dune, read it, because it is very inspirational, and you will find a lot of ideas on terraforming planets in that book. So I'm so glad he brought up the idea of terraforming planets, and I think that they should go for it with Mars. I think it's a great idea. If we become a spacefaring civilization, a lot of people say, a lot of elites in our planet say that our population could be a problem and that we need population control. But why would we need that if we can become a spacefaring civilization and just start colonizing other planets?
Wow. What an interview. First off, Dr. J, kudos. I watched this multiple times, and there's so much information in there. It's just awesome. The most interesting to me was the stuff about quantum mechanics and stuff, but to be honest with you, I can't say anything on it because I am literally just took 2 Advil because my head is hurting. There are just some things, you just can't wrap your... I mean, I get the concept, but it's... That's why we have Dr. Michio Kaku to figure these things out. So, the interview has so many topics that it covers. But the one that I can talk about, because I kind of get it, is the wormholes with the Einstein-Rosen bridge, the whole looking glass concept, going in one black hole, coming out another. But when he mentioned how if you go back to the original, you will end up in a parallel, he compares it to an elevator. You may get on and then the door closes and then you open it up and you're on a different level, same kind of floor pattern, just minor differences. So that was really interesting. I never thought of that concept before, where you had this sliding elevator shaft and you could enter that way through any parallel universe. So that was intriguing. Yeah. My head is still spinning.
One thing that amazes me about these scientists like Michio Kaku here, they somehow believe that time travel is going to be possible. They don't know when, but once we crack that egg open, I think we might see it according to them. I don't agree that there will ever be time travel. It's not as easy as Back to the Future. You just put in, 1955, and already the computer knows where to go and land, and there's so much math and compute power. I don't understand how that would ever be a thing. You would have to land on Earth back in time or in the future and land on it. You have to disintegrate and regenerate. I don't buy it. I really don't. But it's possible, I guess. There's They say, you can go, Michio Kaku said, you can go back in time and be your own father, be your own grandfather, be your own nephew, be your own mother. It's just you're making different copies of yourself.
The other part of the interview that was very intriguing that I can feel confident discussing was when he discusses the UFOs flying at high rates of speed and zigzagging, and how they have already calculated by the mass of the ship that if there was an organic living, anything organic really, it would just demolish it into like goo. And so he made the comment that he thinks that they are drones, and that would make a lot more sense than little aliens in there that are just banging around like in a ping pong or a pinball machine. So that makes a lot of sense. But then it makes you wonder, where'd they come from? Is there a mothership above the cloud? We don't know. But yes, that is a wonderful theory, and I've kind of heard of it, but Michio Kaku has a way of explaining things. One of his earlier books, Hyperspace, I read way back in the 90s. And the way he can simplify it, other than this section that made my head hurt, is quite impressive, and especially because how brilliant he is. So, lots and lots of respect for the man. And for you, Dr. J, for keeping up and keeping the show going. I would have bamboozled and just, fumbled it up. So kudos to you.
Wow. Michio Kaku. Dr. Michio Kaku, one of my favorite, scientists, right? He's a scientist, astrophysicist. I think he's everything. I like, towards the beginning of this interview, how he explains where we came from and where we're heading as a society. Like right now we're at the third stage, I believe. The first was the industrial stage, as he says, where, we had the locomotive, right? Then the second one was the electric stage. We get the light bulb and all sorts of ways to see in dark places. Then we went into the high tech. High tech's where we're at now, right? Satellites. We even see the beginning of AI, which throws us into the next stage that's coming up, which is physics at a molecular level, I guess. Look, this isn't in my wheelhouse. I'm just saying, when I was listening to him, I was fascinated by where we're heading, because next is really good AI, nanotech, biotech, and then that throws us into the fifth stage, where I don't know if maybe it will come true, but where computers can read your mind. I know they started that a few years back. I know people can look at things with their eyes and move it with their eyes, but thought and moving, typing, I think it was just typing. That's phenomenal. You just think of a letter and it goes up on the screen. Interfusion reactors are coming up in 10 to 20 years, according to Dr. Michio Kaku. God, I love that guy. Just turn it on, this interfusion reactor, and free energy forever. It's amazing stuff.
Another section that he discusses in this interview that I thought was quite interesting was the whole process of how they cost everything, or how they price everything. And he was talking about it being, to put me into space, it would be my weight in gold. And if you want to go to the moon, it was like $100,000 per pound or something crazy. That was really interesting to learn. So that's what I love about this. You learn something new every day.
Michio Kaku did talk about the possibility of the Tic Tac UFO being a, what did he say, hydrosonic drone? Because 10 years ago, they were, I guess China, Russia, and the USA have been working on these. So is it so far out of the realm of reality that what they saw, was it Fravor? Is it what they saw not really a UFO, but possibly, as I straighten out here, a man-made object that can actually go anywhere from Mach 5 to Mach 20, which is sick. It's ridiculous. But there were some characteristics of that Tic Tac: stopping on a dime, going into the water, possibly meeting up with another ship under the water, a USO. I mean, there was multiple credible witnesses, but it's pretty amazing that it's possible. We already have the technology and nobody's saying it's ours. Amazing. One thing I like what Michio Kaku says, because I don't agree with it, is that he thinks there's going to be time travel possibly in the future. Doesn't know when, but he thinks with what he knows that it's possible we could go into parallel universes. Maybe time travel, that is a form of time travel, go into a parallel universe. But he says you could actually make different copies of yourself and of your father. You could be your own mother, your own father, your own nephew. You know, you could go back in time and be all these people if you had the power to do so. I don't buy it. I don't think there's that type of computing power, even in the future. Even if it's quantum computing, I don't think that it could make you disappear and reappear in another time. I don't know. What do I know? The Philadelphia experiment, something happened over there. But I was very interested to hear Michio Kaku say if it is possible, you could create copies of parallel paradox universes. I'm like, wow. So amazing what I don't know. Oh man, that was great. Great interview.
Got to thank Dr. J for getting this exclusive interview for Third Phase of Moon. We've tried for a decade and Dr. J finally pulled it off, and we're here sharing it right now. We thought it'd be off topic for Michio to discuss the UFO phenomenon, or even Pentagon and their clandestine operations in regards to UFOs. But he came to the table and brought it. Michio Kaku, the astrophysicist, is bringing in mathematics, technology, and the possibilities of the UFO phenomenon existing. Got to thank Dr. J for sharing this incredible interview right here at Third Phase of Moon, and be sure to subscribe to Dr. J Radio Live at his YouTube channel to check out the full interview. The link will be in the description below, and be sure to tell him that Third Phase of Moon sent you. I want to thank everybody from around the world who joined us in this incredible episode with Michio and what he had to say, and the guest panel of their insight in regards to what the heck is going on in our universe and our world. Everybody, keep your eyes on the skies. We're not alone. We'll see you real soon.
Third